In the far future, when humans had spread across the stars, there were fleets of shining warships that guarded the colonies and the trade routes. These fleets were filled with ships that were strong, fast, and perfect in design. Every admiral took pride in commanding such vessels. Every soldier felt honored to serve on them. But hidden among this glory was a ship no one cared for. The Obsidian Raven, a ship that looked broken before it even joined a battle. Its black hull was scratched and burned. Its engines made strange noises, and its size was smaller than most cruisers. Other captains laughed when they saw it, calling it a relic, calling it junk, calling it a mistake that still floated in space. The crew of the Raven felt the sting of those words every day. They walked the hangar floors of star bases and heard the whispers, other soldiers mocking them, other officers shaking their heads. Some even wondered if the ship should have been scrapped long ago. The Raven was given missions that no one wanted. Escorting cargo, patrolling empty sectors, watching borders where nothing ever happened. It was like the fleet had forgotten it even existed. It was the warship no one respected, and it seemed doomed to fade into history without glory. But inside the ship, things were different. The captain, a quiet man with sharp eyes, spoke little but watched everything. He had chosen his crew carefully, men and women who were also overlooked, soldiers who were unwanted on other ships, pilots who were too wild for strict commanders, engineers who had strange ideas, people who did not belong anywhere else. On the Raven they found a home, they trained hard, they listened to their captain, and though the outside galaxy mocked them, inside their hearts they carried pride, not for how the ship looked, but for how they stood together. Still, when the fleet gathered for war games, the Raven was kept at the edge like a guest not truly invited. Other ships flew in perfect formations, shining metal catching the starlight. Their commanders boasted, their crews laughed loudly, and in the middle of it all the Raven drifted silently. A dark shadow among bright giants. It was easy to ignore, it was easy to laugh at. No one knew the truth that the Raven was not like the others. No one wanted to know, they just turned away. One night in the void, as the fleet rested near a quiet system, the Raven floated apart, its crew working silently, repairing tiny cracks, upgrading systems in secret. The captain walked the halls, his boots echoing on metal floors. He spoke to his people not about glory, not about respect, but about survival. He told them one day the galaxy would change, one day an enemy would come that the proud ships could not face, and when that day came, the Raven would not laugh. The Raven would not mock. The Raven would be ready. Some of the crew doubted, some felt fear, but all of them believed their captain's eyes. They were steady, unshaken, and filled with something the others had long lost: patience. When news of danger first came, the Raven was the first to hear it. Signals on the edge of space, strange movements in the dark. The communications officer reported it, but the high command dismissed it. They laughed once more, saying the Raven saw ghosts, saying the ship was too old to read scanners correctly. The captain gave no argument. He simply ordered his crew to stay alert. He ordered them to prepare in silence while the rest of the fleet laughed in shining halls. Drinking and boasting, the Raven worked in the shadows, preparing for a storm only they believed was coming. The crew sometimes looked out at the fleet, the huge battleships glowing like suns, their names carried across the galaxy with honor, while their own ship was forgotten, nameless in the songs of the Navy. Yet there was a fire in their hearts, a thought that one day things would change. One day the universe would see them. One day the Raven would show the truth, that a warship is not judged by paint and polish, but by the heart of those who guide it. And that night in the void, as stars burned cold and endless, the forgotten warship drifted silently, waiting for destiny to arrive. And destiny was closer than anyone thought, unknown to the fleet. In the dark between galaxies, something moved, something alien, something old and hungry, watching the humans with silent eyes. It had already chosen its first target. It had already marked the proud shining ships, but it did not notice the Raven, the small dark ship that blended with shadows, the ship no one respected, the ship that would one day leave the fleet in ruins. The crew of the Raven did not know it yet. The admirals of the fleet did not fear it yet. But the story of the forgotten warship had already begun, and once it began, it could never be stopped. The stars did not speak. The void gave no warning, but in the silence of space, in the cold emptiness where even light seemed to die, the Obsidian Raven carried a secret. It carried the weight of survival. It carried the strength of the forgotten, and soon, when fire and death spread across the galaxy, The name no one spoke with respect would be carved into legend. For now, though, it was still just the warship no one respected, waiting in the dark, patient as the night itself. The fleet was gathered near the border of human space, their ships shining like silver blades under the light of distant suns. Soldiers moved across hangar decks. Officers shouted orders, and laughter echoed through the wide metal halls. They believed no enemy could ever match their power. They believed their fleet was unbreakable, but far away, beyond the reach of their proud sensors, shadows were moving, signals faint and strange, carrying a warning, and only one ship listened. Only one ship cared. The warship no one respected. The Obsidian Raven. The Raven's scanners hummed softly. Lines of data streamed across flickering screens. The communication officer frowned. He had seen strange distortions before, but these were different, a rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. Pulsing from the dark, he reported it at once. His voice steady but urgent, the captain listened, his sharp eyes fixed on the holographic display. He asked for confirmation, and when the crew confirmed the readings, he gave a single order: prepare quietly, carefully, without drawing attention. When the report was sent to the admirals of the fleet, they laughed. They dismissed it as another error, another mistake from an outdated ship. One commander even said, "If the Raven fears shadows, let them fight shadows." The word spread quickly. Officers joked, soldiers laughed, the Raven was mocked once more. But inside the black corridors of the forgotten ship, no one laughed. The crew tightened their belts, checked their weapons, tuned the engines, sharpened their minds. They believed their captain, and he believed the danger was real. Outside, the fleet hung in perfect formations. Battleships aligned, destroyers circling, carriers ready with swarms of fighters. The admirals watched with pride. It looked unstoppable. A wall of steel and fire stretched across the void. But pride is a veil. Pride blinds the eyes. And the enemy in the dark was not blinded. It watched, it learned, it prepared to strike, silent and patient, just like the void itself. The Raven floated at the edge of the formation, distant, forgotten, as though even in war games and real patrols it had no place among the giants. Its crew looked out through the thick glass of the viewing decks. They saw the glowing engines of ships more powerful than theirs. They heard the radio chatter of officers mocking them, yet they did not answer. They kept silent, waiting for orders from their captain, the man who spoke less and listened more. A man who did not seek respect, but earned loyalty in silence. The first sign of the enemy came like a whisper. A single ship appearing on the scanners, small, swift, almost like a probe. The fleet did not react, they thought it a mistake. But the Raven's crew saw the truth. The pattern of the signals matched what they had studied. This was not random. This was scouting. The captain ordered his crew to track it, and when the little ship vanished back into the dark, the Raven knew the storm was close. The fleet still laughed, still dismissed, but the Raven prepared to fight. Days passed. Tension grew. The stars seemed colder, darker. Even the younger soldiers in the Raven's crew felt it. They spoke in hushed voices in the mess hall. They cleaned their weapons twice. They polished their armor, not for show, but because deep inside they knew the calm would not last. The captain walked among them, silent, steady. His presence alone gave them courage. In the distance, the shining ships of the fleet carried on with their drills, blind to the shadow that crept ever closer. Then came the moment. Without warning, the void cracked open. Enemy ships poured out, dark and alien, their shapes twisted like nightmares, their weapons glowing with strange light. The fleet froze for only a second, then the admiral shouted, "Form up! Fire at will!" Beams of energy ripped across the stars. Missiles streaked through the black. The proud fleet unleashed its fury, confident that no enemy could stand before them. But the enemy did not fall. The enemy moved like smoke, cutting through fire, striking back with power that shredded steel like paper. One by one, the shining ships exploded, torn apart in flashes of light, their screams filling the comm channels. The Raven did not join the charge. The captain held his ship back, watching, waiting, learning. While chaos spread across the fleet, his crew trembled not from fear, but from the sight of giants falling, battleships crushed, carriers split open, destroyers cut to pieces. Pride was burning in the fire, arrogance dying in the void, and yet the Raven remained, silent, unseen, preparing for its turn. Among the screams and explosions, the Raven's scanners picked out patterns in the enemy's attack, movements that others could not see. The captain's voice rang calm and clear, directing his crew. Engines flared. The black warship slipped through the chaos, dodging beams, vanishing into shadows, using speed and strange maneuvers no one expected. It did not fight yet. It studied, it learned, it planned. And though the other captains mocked it before, now in the darkness they did not even see it. They were too busy dying. The fleet was breaking, the proud wall of steel crumbling, admirals shouting in panic, officers begging for orders, soldiers screaming in fear, and in the middle of this storm, the forgotten ship, the mocked ship, the warship no one respected, remained steady, its captain whispering to his crew, "Not yet, wait." And they obeyed, their hearts beating fast, their hands gripping controls, their eyes on the enemy, waiting for the moment to strike. The enemy believed victory was theirs. The humans believed defeat was certain, but the Raven's crew felt something different. Deep inside, they felt the weight of destiny pressing upon them, and though no one respected their ship, though no one believed in their strength, they were ready to rise from the shadows, ready to show the galaxy that even the forgotten can change the fate of war. In the distance, the enemy closed in. The fleet burned, and the Raven prepared to move. The next chapter of its legend about to begin. The first clash between humans and the alien swarm became a storm of light and death. Beams of fire cut across the stars. Missiles tore through the black void, and the proud human fleet fought with all its power. But power was not enough. The alien ships were different. They moved like living shadows. Their armor bent human weapons away. Their weapons pierced steel as if it were paper in only minutes. Whole squadrons of shining warships were turned into burning wreckage. The admirals shouted orders, their voices cracked with fear, and hope began to fade across the fleet. In the chaos, the obsidian Raven slipped between fire and ruin, its dark hull blending with the shadows. It was smaller, weaker, and ignored by both friend and foe. While the larger warships drew the full fury of the alien weapons, the Raven moved carefully, its captain silent, his eyes fixed on the scanners, his crew tense but steady. They had seen this coming. They had prepared when no one else had listened, and now as giants fell, the forgotten ship remained alive. The crew watched the destruction with clenched jaws. They saw carriers split open, spilling fighters that never even launched. They saw battleships torn in half. Their names once spoken with pride, lost in fire. One young pilot whispered that maybe the fleet was doomed. Maybe the war was already lost. But the captain's voice cut through the fear, calm and sharp. "No fleet is doomed while we still breathe." And with those words, the crew found strength. Their eyes hardened, their hands steadied. They were ready to fight. The captain studied the enemy. His mind working fast, the aliens did not fight like humans. They attacked in waves coordinated without words, flowing like water around obstacles, striking where the fleet was weakest. But even water can be cut if the blade is sharp enough. The Raven would be that blade. Not by force, not by size, but by precision, by daring, by believing where others had failed. "Helm," the captain ordered. "Take us into the debris field." The pilot hesitated. The field was a graveyard of burning ships, filled with shattered metal and drifting corpses, but the captain's eyes were steady. The pilot obeyed, and the Raven slipped into the wreckage, the crew silent as they passed the glowing ruins of what had been humanity's pride, their hearts heavy, but their mission clear. They would survive, they would fight back. They would find the weakness no one else could see. Among the ruins, the Raven's scanners pulsed, mapping enemy movements. Studying their patterns, the crew worked quickly, whispering to each other, their voices low. Every detail mattered. Every second counted, and then they found it. A gap, small, hidden, but real. The aliens moved as one, but in their unity was rhythm. And in rhythm there is always a pause. A beat where even the strongest wave can be broken. The captain's lips curved into the faintest smile, the kind his crew had learned to fear and trust. The smile that meant action was coming. "Arm the lances," he said, and the weapons officer's hands moved fast. The Raven's guns were not as powerful as the great ships, but they were precise, sharp, built for strikes that mattered. The crew braced, the ship turned, and in the silence before the storm, every heart beat as one, waiting for the command, waiting for the moment, and then it came. Fire! The Raven's guns lit the void. Beams of pure energy lanced out, cutting into the gap. The alien formation rippled. The first enemy ship shuddered, its strange armor cracking, and then it exploded. A flash brighter than the stars, the crew cheered, but the captain's voice was calm. Again, the guns fired, another ship fell, then another. The rhythm was broken. The wave was cut, and for the first time the aliens hesitated. Across the fleet, Shattered survivors saw it through the chaos and death. They saw the small dark warship striking blows that no battleship could. The Raven, the ship they had mocked, the ship they had forgotten, was fighting like a predator, slipping through wreckage, dodging beams, cutting into the enemy with precision that seemed impossible. Soldiers on broken bridges whispered its name. Commanders stared in disbelief. The warship no one respected was now their only shield. But the enemy was not finished. Their ships twisted, their formation changed. They turned their eyes to the Raven, the small dark shadow that had wounded them. Beams of alien light lanced toward it. Burning through the wreckage, the Raven spun, engines flaring, slipping between fire and ruin, its crew gripping their stations, sweat on their brows, fear in their chests, but never breaking. The captain gave calm orders, his voice steady, guiding them like a hand through the storm. The Raven was not faster, not stronger, but it was smarter, and in the hands of its captain it became untouchable. Every strike from the Raven tore deeper into the enemy. Every maneuver brought it closer to danger, and still it survived. Still it fought. Still it refused to fall, and slowly the tide began to shift. The aliens that had cut through the mighty fleet with ease were now bleeding. Broken ships drifting in the void, their rhythm shattered, their waves scattered, and at the heart of it was the Raven, the forgotten warship, the outcast, the shadow that no one had respected. The battle was far from over, the fleet was still burning. The aliens still outnumbered them, but something had changed. The crew of the Raven felt it in their bones. Hope, fragile and fierce, rising from the ashes of despair. And across the surviving ships, voices began to speak. Voices that had once mocked. Voices that now whispered with awe. The Raven fights. And in that moment, as the void blazed with fire and death, a legend was born. A legend carved not by pride, not by power, but by the will of those who refused to be forgotten. The obsidian Raven drifted through the smoking ruins of battle, its dark hull scarred, its engines hot but still alive. The proud fleet lay scattered, broken ships burning in the void, their commanders gone, their glory shattered. And yet the Raven endured. The warship no one respected had struck where others failed. And in that moment, the crew realized what they had always known deep inside. Their ship was not what it seemed. In the quiet after the storm, the crew gathered in the dim light of the command deck, sweat still clinging to their faces, fear still echoing in their hearts, but behind the fear there was fire. They had faced the swarm and survived, not by luck but by something more, something hidden, something that only their captain truly understood. The captain stood before them, his eyes cold and steady, and he began to speak, his voice low, carrying secrets that had never been spoken aloud. He told them the truth of the Raven's birth. Long before any of them had joined its crew, the Raven had been designed in secret, built not as a jewel of the fleet but as an experiment. The admirals had wanted weapons that could outthink enemies, that could move like shadows, that could fight not with sheer strength but with cunning. They had poured strange technologies into its hull, systems too risky for proud flagships, ideas too untested for their golden war machines. And when the project failed to meet their vision, they had abandoned it, discarding the Raven like a mistake, giving it to those no one else wanted, never realizing they had built something greater than they imagined. The crew listened in silence, their eyes wide, their hearts pounding. The captain spoke of hidden systems buried deep in the Raven's core, old codes that the admirals had forgotten, weapons that did not shine on records but burned bright in battle. He spoke of an artificial intelligence woven into the ship itself, quiet, subtle, a mind that guided them in ways no one could see. The Raven was not simply steel and circuits. It was alive in its own way, and it had chosen them, the forgotten, the unwanted, to be its guardians. The engineers remembered strange readings they had once dismissed. The pilots remembered moments when the ship seemed to move before they even gave the order. The gunners recalled how targeting systems locked with impossible speed. Piece by piece, the truth became clear. The Raven was more than it appeared. It was more than a relic, more than a mistake. It was a weapon hidden in plain sight. A secret too dangerous for the admirals, a secret too valuable to waste, and now it was their secret. Theirs alone. The captain did not smile, he simply nodded, his voice firm. Now you know why we are here, why we survive when others fall. The galaxy will never give us respect, so we must carve it from the fire ourselves. And his words lit a spark in every heart. Pride not in the fleet, not in the admirals, but in their ship, in themselves, in the unity that bound them together. They were not forgotten anymore. not in their own eyes. They were chosen, but there was no time for glory. The enemy was still out there. More ships moving in the dark. More shadows waiting to strike. The Raven had survived the first wave. But survival alone was not enough. They had to strike harder. They had to reveal more of the power that slept within the ship's hull. The crew returned to their stations, hands moving with confidence. Fear still there but transformed. Fear had become fuel. Every heartbeat in rhythm with the engines. Every breath carrying the weight of destiny. The ship itself seemed to awaken, systems humming, lights flickering with strange energy. The AI stirring in its core, guiding their hands, whispering through the pulse of data, not in words but in instincts, in patterns, in a sense that they were never truly alone. The Raven was with them, not just a vessel but a partner, silent, watchful, deadly. Through the broken fleet came new orders, desperate voices calling for retreat. For regrouping, the survivors looked for leadership, for hope, and they saw only ruin. But in the shadows of the wreckage, one ship still moved with purpose, one ship still hunted, and though the admirals had mocked it, now their eyes turned toward it, unsure, afraid, but desperate enough to follow. The Raven did not answer their calls. Not yet. It had its own mission, its own path, its own battle to fight. The captain ordered a course set toward the heart of the enemy formation, not to charge blindly, but to cut, to bleed, to tear them apart piece by piece. The Raven slipped through the dark, weaving between wreckage, hiding in the shadows. And when the moment came, its hidden weapons burned, lances of energy sharper than any blade, missiles with guidance no human had ever seen. Alien ships shuddered, cracked, and fell. The Raven tore through them like a ghost, unseen until it struck, unstoppable once it did. The crew felt it, the strange harmony between themselves and the ship, between flesh and steel, between human will and machine mind. Every shot landed true, every maneuver cut through the chaos. And for the first time the swarm faltered, the aliens twisted in confusion, their perfect rhythm broken, their unity cracked, and through that crack the Raven slipped, striking again and again, bleeding the enemy while the fleet watched in silence, stunned that the warship No One Respected had become the blade that kept them alive. The battle still raged, the night still burned with fire and death, but the Raven no longer drifted as an outcast. It no longer fought as a forgotten relic. It fought as what it truly was, a weapon born from secrecy, sharpened by failure, and guided by those who had been cast aside. The crew felt the weight of the truth, heavy but glorious. They were not fighting for respect anymore. They were fighting for survival, for vengeance, for destiny. And as the Raven vanished once more into the dark, leaving wreckage in its wake, the legend deepened, whispered first among its crew, then carried across the fleet. The warship No One Respected was rising, and the galaxy would never forget its name again. The battle raged across the stars. Broken ships drifted like burning islands in the void. Human voices cried out through shattered comms, and alien shadows moved in deadly rhythm. The proud fleet that once believed itself untouchable now clung to survival. And in the middle of this storm, the obsidian Raven cut through the dark like a knife, small, scarred, and ignored no longer. Every strike it made carved cracks into the enemy's perfect formation. Every maneuver revealed that the forgotten warship had teeth sharper than anyone imagined. The crew felt the shift before anyone else. They sensed the enemy faltering, not by retreat but by hesitation. The swarm was no longer a perfect wave. Their movements were slower, less precise. The Raven had broken their rhythm, and in battle, rhythm was everything. The captain stood on the command deck, his eyes fixed on the holographic map of the fight. The enemy ships glowed like a storm. But in the storm were gaps, small openings invisible to all but him. His voice cut the silence. Helm, prepare to strike at Vector 13, weapons ready. Wait for my mark. His crew obeyed without question, hands steady, eyes hard, their faith in him absolute. The Raven slipped through the wreckage, its black hull blending with the debris of larger ships. Alien weapons flashed past, too slow, too late. The Raven darted into the gap. Its hidden lances burned once more. A blast of energy split an enemy vessel in half. The explosion rippled through their ranks. Scattering their formation further, the crew cheered, but the captain's hand stayed raised, his voice calm again, and they struck once more. Another alien ship fell, another opening appeared. The enemy was bleeding, and the Raven was the blade. Across the remnants of the human fleet, battered survivors watched in disbelief. Ships that had once mocked the Raven now whispered its name with awe. Officers begged for direction. Soldiers prayed for a chance to fight back. And slowly, hesitantly, the broken fleet began to rally, their eyes on the one ship still moving with purpose. The one ship that fought not for glory, but for survival. The Raven. A signal crackled through the comms. A surviving destroyer calling, "Raven, lead us, where do we strike?" The captain's eyes flicked to the display. His crew glanced at him, waiting for his answer. He had never sought command, never wanted the respect of admirals, but in that moment, leadership had already been forced upon him. He gave no speech, no proud words, only the truth. Follow us into the dark, strike when we strike, move when we move. And with that, the fleet obeyed, broken giants moving in the shadow of the small forgotten ship. The Raven darted forward, weaving through fire, its allies following in jagged formation, not as precise as before but fueled by desperation and hope. The alien swarm turned to meet them, beams flashing, weapons tearing through space. But the Raven guided the humans into the gaps, into the weak points no one else could see. Each strike tore deeper, each maneuver outsmarted the enemy, and slowly the tide began to turn, not by power but by cunning, not by pride, but by survival. Inside the ship, the crew worked with fire in their eyes. Gunners shouted coordinates. Engineers pushed the engines beyond their limits. Pilots twisted through impossible turns. Every soul on board moved as one, guided by their captain's steady voice and the silent mind of the ship itself. The Raven was alive, the crew was its heart, and together they were unstoppable. Every alien ship that fell became proof that respect was not given. It was taken, and the Raven was taking it one kill at a time. But the enemy was not blind. Their hesitation turned to rage. Their movements shifted once more, faster, sharper, their formation tightening. They had found the source of their pain, and they turned all their fury upon the Raven. Beams of fire locked onto its hull. The void lit with destruction. The crew braced, alarms screamed, metal groaned. But the Raven moved with impossible grace, twisting through the storm, dodging, slipping, striking back. Every shot from its lances cutting down another shadow. Every maneuver daring fate itself. The human fleet gasped as they saw it. The small ship dancing among giants, the Raven drawing the enemy's fire. Every second it lived was another second for them to strike, another chance to breathe. Soldiers who once mocked its name now shouted it like a battle cry. Commanders who once sneered now gave orders to protect it. The warship No One Respected had become the symbol of hope, the turning point in a battle that seemed already lost. Still, the cost was high. The Raven's hull burned. Its shields flickered. The crew felt every impact shake the deck beneath their boots. The engineers fought to keep the systems alive. The weapons officers' hands bled from gripping the controls too tightly. The pilot's vision blurred from strain, but none of them faltered. None of them gave up. They had seen what the galaxy had refused to see. Their ship was not forgotten. It was chosen, and they would fight until the last breath to prove it. The captain's eyes never left the display, his voice calm even as alarm screamed. He saw the final pattern, the final weakness, the chance to break the swarm completely. "This is it," he whispered, then louder. "All weapons. Fire!" The Raven's lances blazed. Missiles streaked into the dark. The enemy's heart shuddered. Their formation collapsed. Alien ships broke apart, twisting in confusion. Their perfect unity shattered beyond repair. The swarm was no longer a wave. It was only scattered shadows, and the fleet surged forward, striking with new strength. In that moment, hope returned to the humans, the tide of battle shifted. The war was not won, but it was no longer lost. And at the center of it all was the Raven. Scarred, battered but unbroken, the warship that no one had respected, now leading the fleet with fire and steel. Its crew standing tall in the face of death, their legend written in the flames of battle. And as the void echoed with the wreckage of alien screams, the galaxy itself seemed to whisper the truth. The turning point had come, and its name was the Obsidian Raven. The battlefield was no longer silent wreckage. It was alive with chaos and desperate fire. Human ships bled from shattered hulls, alien vessels twisted like dark blades in the void. Explosions painted the stars in red and gold. And in the middle of this storm, the Obsidian Raven still flew. Scarred and battered but unyielding, it had become the eye of the storm, the point where survival turned into defiance, where defeat began to shape into something else, something stronger. The fleet that once mocked it now looked to it for salvation. The scattered remnants of battleships and destroyers shifted formation, their captains calling out across comms, voices trembling but determined. "Raven, guide us, Raven. Lead us." Words that had never been spoken before, words heavy with new respect. The captain of the Raven heard them but gave no proud answer. He spoke only what was needed. "Follow our course. Strike when I strike." His voice calm, steady, a lifeline in the chaos. And the fleet obeyed. The Raven darted between wreckage, its black hull blending with shadows. Alien beams lanced toward it, hunting the ship that had wounded their formation. But the Raven twisted, dove, and struck back with precision. Every maneuver sharp, every strike lethal. Its crew moved with the same rhythm. The gunners firing with deadly focus. The engineers coaxing more power from failing systems. The pilots dancing the ship through impossible turns. They were not just surviving now. They were fighting, carving a path of fire through the swarm. The human fleet surged behind them. Emboldened, their weapons lit the void. Their voices rose in shouts of defiance. Ships that moments ago were ready to retreat, now pushed forward, driven by the sight of the Raven's daring. They no longer mocked it. They no longer doubted it. They believed. For in the fire of battle, respect is not spoken. It is earned. And the Raven had earned it with every scar on its hull. Across the enemy lines, the aliens shifted again, their formation tightening, their weapons focusing. They had learned the truth as well. This small, forgotten ship was the heart of the humans now, and if they destroyed it, the hope of the fleet would die with it. Beams of alien light converged. Fire streaked through the void, and the Raven was caught in the storm. Alarms screamed, metal groaned. The hull burned, but still it moved, still it struck. The crew holding their stations with teeth clenched, hearts pounding, refusing to yield. The weapons officer shouted coordinates, his voice hoarse. The gunner's hands bled from controls that shook under the strain. The engineers shouted warnings as systems overloaded, sparks raining down from panels. But through it all, the captain's voice was steady, guiding them, anchoring them. He did not promise safety. He did not speak of glory. He spoke only of survival, of striking harder, of holding longer. And the crew obeyed, for they knew his calm was the thread between life and death. And then came the moment that changed everything. The Raven turned sharply, its engines screaming, and its hidden weapons revealed their full power. The experimental systems buried deep in its design flared to life. Lances of energy cut through alien armor like knives through glass. Guided missiles curved with impossible precision, striking into the heart of the swarm. Enemy ships that had seemed untouchable fell in bursts of fire. Their formation shattered once again, and for the first time in the battle, the aliens reeled back. A silence fell across the human comms, not of fear but of awe. Survivors whispered as they watched. The ship they had mocked, the ship they had scorned, was now tearing through the enemy with a ferocity none had imagined. Voices rose louder, shouts of encouragement, cries of belief, and then almost as one, the fleet roared across the channels, "Raven! Raven! Raven!" It was no longer just a name, it was a battle cry, a beacon of unity in the darkest moment. The captain did not pause to bask in it. He pressed on, pushing his ship and his crew to their limits. The Raven guided the fleet into new formations. Not the polished drills of proud admirals, but the rough, sharp maneuvers of survivors who had learned in fire. Together they cut deeper into the enemy. Every strike more coordinated, every move sharper. The humans were no longer scattered, no longer broken. They were one, bound not by rank but by respect earned in fire. Respect for the ship that had saved them. The aliens struck harder, their fury rising. Beams of light tearing through human ships. Explosions claiming lives every second, but the humans no longer faltered. They no longer looked to their admirals for salvation. They looked to the Raven and they fought with its spirit. Desperate, cunning, and unbreakable. Even as they bled, they struck back. Even as they burned, they moved forward. And the balance of battle shifted further. On the Raven, the crew felt it too. Exhaustion weighed on them. Pain gnawed at their bodies, but inside their hearts burned hotter. They had been outcasts once, forgotten, mocked, but now their names carried weight. Their actions carried respect. They had not begged for it. They had not demanded it. They had earned it. And every alien ship that fell was proof of their worth. The captain stood tall, his eyes locked on the chaos of the battlefield. His voice steady, his ship scarred, his crew bloodied. But together they had turned despair into defiance, weakness into strength, and respect into unity. And as the Raven blazed through the storm, leading the fleet in a battle that should have been their end, one truth rang clear across the void. The warship No One Respected had become the warship everyone followed, and in the fire of this battle, its legend was sealed in the hearts of all who lived to see it. The battle had stretched into endless hours. The stars themselves seemed dimmer, hidden behind fire and wreckage. The human fleet bled with every passing moment, their ships cracked and torn, their crews fighting with desperation rather than strength. Yet still they endured, still they fought. Because one ship refused to fall. One ship carried them forward, the Obsidian Raven. The Raven's hull was torn and scorched. Great scars ran across its black armor. Fires burned in its corridors. The crew moved with bruised bodies and shaking hands, but none left their post, none dared to falter, for they knew what their captain knew. The end of the battle was close. One final blow would decide it all, either victory or extinction, and the Raven was the only blade sharp enough to cut that ending. At the heart of the alien swarm, a massive vessel loomed, larger than any human ship. Its dark body pulsed with energy. Its weapons had torn battleships apart in single strikes. Its presence was like a shadow that swallowed light. This was their flagship, the mind of the swarm. Destroy it and the enemy would falter. Fail to destroy it and humanity would be lost. The fleet knew it. The aliens knew it. And the Raven's captain knew it most of all. The survivors of the human fleet called across the comms, voices raw with exhaustion, begging for orders, begging for hope. The admirals were gone, the chains of command broken, and so all eyes turned once more to the Raven, the warship that had led them this far. The captain's voice came steady and sharp. We break the heart, 4 words, simple and final, and every soldier who heard them knew what it meant. They would strike the flagship. They would pour everything into one last stand. There would be no retreat. The Raven led the charge, slipping through fire and wreckage, weaving between beams of alien energy. Its crew braced against the shaking deck. Alarms screamed as systems overloaded. Sparks rained down, but they did not stop. Their eyes fixed on the looming shadow ahead. The gunners' hands bled as they fired. The engineers burned their arms, keeping the engines alive. The pilot's body trembled from strain as she forced the ship through impossible turns. And still they pressed on, still they moved forward, because there was no other path. The alien flagship turned its fury on them. Beams brighter than suns lanced out, slicing through the void. Ships around the Raven were torn apart. Screams filled the comms, but the Raven twisted, dove, rose, cutting through the storm like a predator in the dark. Every strike from its hidden lances burned into the flagship's hull. Every missile drove deeper. The swarm closed around them, shadows biting, tearing. Desperate to end the thorn in their side, but the Raven refused to fall. The fleet followed. Inspired by the madness, ships that should have fled now surged forward, pouring their last strength into the fight. Some fell, burning, but others struck, tearing into the alien vessels, buying seconds, buying space for the Raven to press closer. Respect had become loyalty. Loyalty had become unity, and unity had become sacrifice. Each ship gave what it could, and in the middle of them all the Raven cut toward the heart. Inside the command deck, the captain's eyes never left the flagship's shadow. He saw the weakness, faint but real, its core pulsing with light, a rhythm that matched the swarm. Break the core, break the swarm, he spoke calmly, though his crew could see the weight in his gaze. We will not turn back, the fleet must survive, and to do that, we strike deeper than anyone can follow. The crew nodded, not with fear but with fire, for they had known all along their ship was not meant to be safe. It was meant to be remembered. The Raven dived, engine screaming, its hull tearing as beams grazed it. Its shield shattered, but it pressed on, closer and closer to the flagship's heart. The AI deep in the ship's core stirred with strange light, guiding every move, whispering through the data streams. The Raven itself seemed alive, as if it too understood the choice, as if it too chose to give everything. For one final strike, the enemy swarm closed in, their weapons locked. The flagship's core pulsed brighter, and the captain gave the order that sealed their fate. All power to weapons, all engines forward. Hold nothing back. The Raven's lights dimmed. Its systems bled energy into its lances, into its missiles, into one final strike. The crew worked in silence, their hands steady, their hearts pounding, each one knowing this was their end, each one choosing it anyway. The Raven pierced the flagship's shadow. Its weapons fired with the fury of a dying star. Beams lanced into the core. Missiles struck deep. Explosions tore across the alien vessel. The swarm screamed through the void, their rhythm breaking, their unity shattering. The flagship cracked, split, and in a burst of fire brighter than the sun's, it exploded. the shockwave ripping across the battlefield, tearing through the swarm, scattering them into chaos. For a moment, silence followed, broken only by the sound of human voices gasping in awe. They saw it, the impossible. The swarm broken, the flagship gone, and at the center of the fire, the Raven still drifted, its hull shattered, its engines failing, but alive. The ship that no one had respected had ended the enemy's heart. It had given the fleet victory at the cost of everything, and now it floated in the wreckage, a scarred ghost against the stars. The survivors cried out its name, not in mockery, not in doubt, but in honor. The Raven was no longer forgotten, no longer scorned. It was the warship that had carried them through fire, the warship that had stood when all others fell, the warship that had turned defeat into hope. Its name echoed across the comms, carried across every surviving ship, a name no one would ever mock again. And as the Raven drifted, its lights flickering, its captain standing silent among his crew, the galaxy itself seemed to pause, as if it knew a legend had been born, uncarved not in glory but in sacrifice. The Raven had given everything, and in doing so had become eternal. The final stand of the warship no one respected, now remembered forever. The fire of battle faded into silence. The void that had been filled with screams and explosions now drifted with debris and broken metal. The human fleet, once proud and shining, now floated in fragments, ships scarred, crews weary but alive. They had survived the impossible. They had stood against the swarm and endured. And at the center of their survival was one ship, small, dark, scarred beyond recognition, the Obsidian Raven. The Raven drifted through the wreckage, its engines dim, its hull torn and bleeding sparks into the black. Inside its corridors the crew moved like shadows. Tired, wounded, but standing, they had given everything, poured their lives into one final strike. And though they expected death, though they were ready to fall, they still lived, their ship still lived. It had carried them through fire and ruin, and in the silence that followed, they realized what they had become. No longer outcasts, no longer forgotten, but legends. The surviving ships turned their sensors toward the Raven. Officers whispered on comms. Soldiers stared through cracked viewports. Their voices carried not laughter now, but reverence. The ship they had mocked, the crew they had dismissed, had done what no fleet, no admiral, no proud vessel could do. It had broken the heart of the swarm. It had saved them all, and now, in the aftermath, the Raven stood not as a relic but as a symbol, proof that greatness is not born in polish and pride, but in will and sacrifice. The captain of the Raven stood tall on the command deck, his uniform torn, blood streaked across his face, his eyes steady as ever. He looked upon his crew, men and women bruised, burned, exhausted, yet smiling through the pain. They had done it together, and in their hearts they knew the truth. Even if the Raven never flew again, even if it drifted into the void as a tomb, its name would live forever, whispered by every survivor, carried across every world. The warship no one respected was now the warship all revered. Messages spread quickly, first among the survivors, then across the fleet, then across the colonies of humanity. The story of the Raven's stand, the forgotten ship that refused to die, the outcast crew that turned despair into victory, in taverns, on distant mining worlds, in halls of government, in the whispers of children who played with toy ships. The name was spoken with awe. Obsidian Raven, the savior, the shadow that struck the swarm, the legend born in fire. Admirals who once mocked it now stood silent in shame. Their grand ships destroyed, their orders failed, while the ship they had discarded rose in glory. Some tried to claim it was chance, some tried to write it as luck, but the truth spread too fast, too fierce. No lie could hold against the weight of what had been seen. Thousands of soldiers had watched the Raven strike. Thousands had cried its name. No one could take that away. The crew themselves did not seek the glory. They worked in silence, repairing what little could be repaired. Their captain spoke few words, only reminding them of what was to come. For the swarm was not gone, only broken, and the galaxy was still dark and full of shadows. Their battle was not the end. It was only the beginning. And the Raven would not rest, not while threats remained, not while survival demanded their fire. And so the ship that had once been forgotten, once hidden in the shadow of greater vessels, became the blade that cut through fear, the shield that guarded humanity. When fleets gathered again, their ships repaired and rebuilt. They no longer laughed at the Raven. They no longer dismissed it. Instead, they gave it the place at the center, the spearhead of their formations, the first to strike, the last to retreat. The name carried weight heavier than any flagship. Whispers spread further, beyond human space carried by traitors and wanderers, the tale of a ship that survived when giants fell, a crew that fought when all others surrendered. Alien merchants repeated it. Outlaws spoke of it in hushed tones. Even enemies began to fear it. For legends travel faster than ships, and the legend of the Raven traveled with fire at its back. The captain knew this weight. He felt it in every order, in every gaze from survivors who looked at him as more than a man. But he did not bend to it. He remained steady, silent, sharp, for he knew the truth. Legends are not made for glory. They are made for duty, for sacrifice, and though the galaxy called them heroes, the Raven and its crew carried the burden quietly, choosing action over pride, shadow over light, because that was what they were born for. As the fleet slowly rebuilt, as colonies healed and celebrated survival, the Raven drifted once more to the edge of formation, where it had always been, where shadows stretched longest, its crew ready, its captain watchful. And though the galaxy roared their name with honor, they still moved silently, patiently, waiting for the next storm, because legends do not end, they wait, they grow. They watch the dark for threats unseen, and in the endless void, where stars burn cold and silent, the obsidian Raven waited, scarred but alive, forgotten no longer, respected by all, feared by enemies, loved by those it saved. And as whispers spread across the stars, one truth echoed louder than all others. The warship No One Respected had left the fleet in ruins, and in doing so it had been reborn, not as a relic, not as an outcast, but as a legend that would never die.